Senator Duckworth, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, earlier this month, a former soldier was sentenced to 45 years in prison for attempting to murder U.S. service members, for attempting to provide material support to terrorists, and illegally transmitting national defense information. In fact, Mr. Messler, the convicted gentleman, provided sensitive details about his unit, including information about its location, movements, and security, to members of the extremist organization Order of the Nine Angles, a white supremacist, neo-Nazi, and pro-jihadist group. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a RAND report dated 2021 that is entitled Reducing the Risk of Extremist Activity in the United States Military.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This report states, and I'll just briefly say this, the vast majority of military personnel and their families are not extremists, but even a small number of people engaged in extremist activities could damage the United States military's reputation, its force, its members, and the larger community. Extremist activities can also be harmful to the individuals who are radicalized and their friends and family. That said, as someone who wore the uniform for 23 years, I mean, I was just a reservist and a guardsman, did not reach the ranks of the gentleman here or even some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I have to say, I am offended at the implication that conducting extremist training means that our military is filled with extremists, just as I personally am appreciative of the fact that we have sharp training, and by conducting sharp training, we're not saying that every member of the military is a harasser or a perpetrator of military sexual assault. Similarly, my entire time since I've left the military has been spent working on mental health for our troops. And by providing mental health training and resiliency training, we are not saying that the military is filled with people who are about to commit suicide. This is simply part of readiness. So that said, I'm going to switch. I just want to put this in record because it's very offensive to me to very politically say that extremism in the military and training against it is saying that the military is full of extremists. The military is full of the bravest, most amazing men and women who do the best job that they can, and they need to be equipped to do their jobs, and that means that they need to be equipped with the training to recognize sexual harassment when it occurs, to recognize extremism when it occurs, to recognize signs of hidden wounds of war when it occurs, so that we can keep our units in the highest levels of readiness. Okay, I'm done with that. Last month, I led a CODEL to Japan and Indonesia, and I'm planning to going back to the region twice more in just the next few months. And in June, Senator Sullivan and I will be leading a delegation to the Shangri-La Dialogue. And Mr. Secretary, I believe you're going to be speaking there, and I look forward to hearing your remarks there. And in August, I'm planning to take a bipartisan group of my colleagues to visit the Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand to spotlight the importance of opportunities that our nations have to partner together. Mr. Secretary, in your testimony, you highlighted the DoD's enhanced maritime security with the Philippines and exercises with Thailand. In what other ways does the department's budget request support our allies and partners in Southeast Asia, and how are you programmed to achieve integrated deterrence in this area of the Indo-Pacific?
Well, thanks, Senator, and certainly, with the PDI, Pacific Deterrence Initiative, we're asking you for some $9.1 billion to improve infrastructure in the region so that we can position our troops further forward and we can be more interoperable. Presence matters. We see a significant investment in the AUKUS agreement. Australia and the UK and the US are working together to provide the Australians a conventionally armed, nuclear-powered submarine capability. And another pillar of AUKUS calls for us to work together on key technologies like AI and hypersonics and long-range fires. And so I think that kind of thing, building interoperability, is really, really key. We're doing some of the same things with the Japanese as we work to become more interoperable with them. We're helping our partners and allies strengthen their capabilities in terms of cyber, and I think all of those things will add value. But we're seeing things in the region now that we weren't seeing 2 years ago. The Japanese doubling its defense investment, more access to the Philippines. As you know, 2 years ago, we were about to get kicked out of the Philippines. But we've moved to strengthen our relationship, and I just think that's powerful. So,
Thank you. I just want to touch on the cyber piece. In fact, last year I included, actually in 2021 NDAA, I included legislation that authorized the Department of Defense to establish a pilot program to enhance cybersecurity, the resilience and the readiness of the military forces of Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia. General Milley, next month I will introduce legislation to expand this important program to include Malaysia and the Philippines. Can you comment on the value of direct engagement with our overseas partners to help build their cyber skills?
I can, not only cyber skills, but any of the military skills. We have excellent military-to-military relations with so many countries. If you look at, for example, the contact group in Europe that the Secretary's organized, 54 countries show up for that to support Ukraine. And obviously, there's only 30 in NATO, so many countries from around the world. In Asia, it's particularly important, I think, given the dynamic nature of the geostrategic environment in Asia. So the more countries, excuse me, the more countries that we have with us, whether it's cyber or anything else, is critically important. In the world of cyber, though, we know that cyber and space are two domains now of armed conflict, including the traditional ones of land, sea, and air. So as we modernize the force and move into cyber and space, those two domains are going to be fundamental to success in any kind of conflict. So working with our allies and partners in the region and developing their capabilities along with ours, I think will go a long way to deterrence, and if necessary, if deterrence fails and it's necessary, then it'll go a long way to prevailing in the armed conflict.
Thank you, and thank you for your remarkable career of service to this nation and also that of your wife. She not only directly saved lives herself in a very hands-on way, quite literally, but also her work on mental health for our troops is continuing to pay off dividends. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator
yield back.
Duckworth. Senator Budd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank you all for being here today and for your time. It's been very helpful. This week, the Senate will likely vote to repeal the 1991 and the 2002 authorizations of use of military force against Iraq. Now, one of the amendments considered was whether to replace the 2002 AUMF with an authorization for the use of force against Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. Now, that vote failed, but I think there is an important issue here that needs to be addressed. Now, despite the likely repeal of the 2002 AUMF, the U.S. still has forces in Iraq at the invitation of the Iraqi government to train, advise, and to assist Iraqi forces. We also have forces in Syria conducting operations against ISIS. Now, given Iran's continuing malign activities in the region, our forces are at risk of attack from Iranian-backed militias, and in fact have been attacked by those militias more than 80 times, including just last week, resulting in the death of a U.S. contractor and injuries to U.S. service members. So Secretary Austin and General Milley, a brief yes or no, please. Do you agree that the President has both the authority and the responsibility under Article 2 of the Constitution to protect the United States and our forces from attack and the threat of imminent attack? Again, yes or no. Secretary Austin.
I do, Senator.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, thank you. But despite the more than 80 attacks by Iranian-backed militias, the United States has only responded with force just a handful of times. In my view, that's unacceptable. Secretary Austin, earlier you told my colleague Senator Cotton that our last retaliatory strikes against IRGC infrastructure, it was against infrastructure. Now, does that mean a building or a warehouse? The question behind the question is really, why not target the IRGC leadership or officers directing these attacks?
Thank you, Senator. We can be more specific in closed session, but it included a headquarters element building and also storage sites where key munitions were being stored and other capabilities were being developed, and there were people in those facilities.
Thank you for that. The point being that we need to reassert deterrence, and our current responses don't seem to effectively do that. Weakness only breeds more aggression. Weakness is provocative, And if we only respond when they kill an American, they'll continue attacking, hoping to injure as many as possible. There's no reason why this administration should not respond more forcefully should Iranian-backed militias threaten U.S. forces in Iraq or in Syria. It's important for the American people to know that it's not because the administration doesn't have the legal authority to do so. This administration simply seems to lack the will. So, Secretary Austin, another issue that needs to be addressed is the department's use of taxpayer dollars to facilitate abortions. Now, I join my colleagues in publicly denouncing the policy changes, unfortunately made at your direction, to authorize uncharged absences and travel pay for those seeking abortions. So the military is not a place for social agendas. So I'll ask you here, will you rescind those abhorrent policies?
What I will say, Senator, is number one, this policy does not fund abortions. And I want to be clear on that. This policy provides access to non-covered reproductive health care. And as I said earlier, you know, almost 1 in 5 of our troops are women.
Very aware, but I understand that ultimately it's taxpayer dollars that are for this uncharged absences and the travel expenses related to that. I understand your point, but I just still think that's not the right answer. And until these policies are rescinded, I'm going to also have to consider holds against DOD nominees in solidarity with my colleagues. Mr. Secretary, you can fix this. The 158 holds, in essence, that are there. You could fix this in nearly an instant. So I would encourage that. Shifting gears a bit,
sir, I would encourage you to help us make sure that we have the leadership in place to lead our magnificent force.
And I would agree with you. I completely agree with you. And you can fix that nearly instantaneously with a change in policy. So thank you. We understand, Secretary Austin, that the committee has heard from most of the combatant commanders so far earlier this year, and I've asked each of them about foreign military sales and how that's working in their areas of responsibility. And each have said that the process is not fast or flexible enough to meet our partners' defense requirements, and that we're at risk of losing our security of partner of choice status to China. So what efforts are the department taking internally to streamline the FMS process, and are there issues that you think need to be addressed by Congress?
A year ago, I put together a Tiger team to address this specific issue, and you're right. I mean, there are a number of our allies and partners who clearly want to see capability be provided quicker, and I fully understand their concerns. So we're doing everything we can to identify log jams and work through those to speed up things. Industry's coming out of a 2-year trough there because of COVID, as you know, sir, and you know, it'll take a little time for industry to catch up, but we're going to do everything we can to make sure that, you know, the bureaucracy is not slowing things down, and we'll continue this work. But I don't disagree with you that this is something that that requires consistent focus on, and we're going to do that.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you both. I yield.
Thank you. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Austin, earlier today at this hearing, Senator Ernst asked General Milley about conflict in the Indo-PACOM region, and the General's response referenced the importance of irregular warfare. So, Secretary Austin, I've been rather disappointed with the halting and repetitive process that DOD has exhibited as it attempts to establish the Irregular Warfare Center. As you may recall, the IW Center was authorized by this committee back in 2020, and the project was intended to honor Arizona Senator and former Armed Services Committee Chairman John McCain's legacy of support for the concept of a whole society approach to our national security. He knew that traditional military strength isn't enough in today's geopolitics, and that we also need to succeed in the irregular and in the competition spaces, not just in conflict. In recognition of the original intent for this project, this committee supported naming the center for Senator John McCain. Now, I've also been working closely with this committee and the department to ensure that we leverage expertise and ideas from universities to help our nation get after these significant challenges. And the original authority identified the McCain Institute at Arizona State University as a site to be reviewed as a location for the establishment of the center. And I appreciate your memo, Mr. Secretary, from July of 2022, affirming your decision to create the Center for Security Studies in Irregular Warfare and directing DoD to act expeditiously, including in determining a location. But now we're nearly 3 years down the road, and we've had numerous duplicative site reviews, and we're still waiting for a final decision. And what I don't think we need is a new basing process. We need a decision. And it's clear to me that it's time to move forward with Arizona State University and ensure that the IW Center can deliver on its promise for DoD and the nation. So, Mr. Secretary, can I have your commitment that you will look into these delays and push the department to come to a final decision on this?
Certainly, Senator, you have my commitment that I'll look into the delays. You know, what I've required the team to do is to make sure that we have a process that's transparent and also that avoids outside influence, and to make sure that we're above board. But I'll certainly look into it and get a brief back to you on specific delays that we've encountered.
Well, thank you, General, because 3 years is it's too long, and this is, as General Milley pointed out, is just important if we wind up in a conflict in the Western Pacific. So thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Milley, last year Congress authorized multi-year procurement contracts as a way to boost our nation's dwindling supply of munitions and to purchase additional systems in support of Ukraine. And this has had a meaningful impact on a lot of Arizona businesses who produce some of these critical munitions. Multi-year procurement can save the government a lot of money. It can save it a lot of money over the long run and provide much-needed stability for manufacturing business, while also ensuring that our military and our key partners and allies have the munitions that they need. General Milley, can you please, in the time I have remaining, just talk about the impact that multi-year procurement has had so far in securing weapons both for the United States but also for Ukraine? Has this been beneficial? And do you think that the munitions that Congress authorized for multi-year procurement is enough, or
So first, multi-year contracts are essential, and passing a budget on time with no continuing resolution is essential to ensure we have multi-year contracts. So those two things are linked, and I cannot emphasize that enough. That's important, and it has had a big impact, positive impact on Ukraine, and it'll help to replenish our stocks as well. So yes,
do you think we should expand it to some other products?
I do.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Thank you,
Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Kelly. I would ask, I've been very tolerant of the time, but I ask people to say with 5 minutes, we're running quite late. Senator Scott, please. Thank you, Senator
Only
Kelly.
for Senator Rosen and me? Only for us two? Thank you. Thank you guys for your service. Thank you for all the men and women that serve. On the Personnel Subcommittee for Armed Services, Senator Warren and I had a presentation on how bad we're doing on recruiting. And our recruiting numbers are pretty pathetic right now. It seems like, I remember I joined in 18, joined the Navy. We knew who our enemies were. We knew what the military's role was. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of Americans are a little concerned. We got some polling data from the Reagan Institute and the National Independent Panel on Military Service and Readiness showing us that many Americans and a majority of active duty service members find the military to be politicized and focused on what divides us instead of what unites us. So if that's true, what can you do, and what are you doing to make sure? Because I think when Senator Sullivan was bringing up the fact that we shouldn't have Marines in pictures like that and with speeches. What are you doing to make sure our military is not perceived to be a political arm of whoever the president is? Doesn't matter whether they're Republican or Democrat.
Well, first of all, I would just, two things. First, in terms of the satisfaction of the troops that are in the ranks and how we view ourselves, Senator, I would just point to the fact that we have the highest re-enlistment rates probably that we've seen in several decades. And what that means is that people are satisfied they're with the opportunities they're provided and with the development they're receiving. The second thing is with respect to recruiting. As you know, there are a number of things that have combined to create headwinds, and they include the lowest jobless rate that we've seen in many, many years. Also, 2 years of COVID. And you know, Senator, without recruiters not having access to high schools and centers of influence for 2 years will have a profound impact on our ability to recruit. Our leadership in the services is doing the right thing. I mean, our secretaries, our chiefs are doing the right things. They're investing, beginning to invest the right monies in advertising and encouraging their recruiters to be in the right spaces. They're hiring the right people to be recruiters. Now, I used to be a recruiter, so I'm not guessing at what this takes. I know how hard this is and what you need to do to be successful. They're beginning to do those things again, and I think we'll see the trends move in a different direction.
So next year we'll have good numbers?
Next year you'll have better numbers. We'll be where we want to be probably the year after that. It took 2 years to get us to where we are because of COVID. It'll take a little bit longer to get turned around. So.
Senator, I've had many tanks and conversations with all the chiefs on this whole topic. Yes, we have a recruiting challenge, no question about it. I do think there is a cause and effect linked to COVID. I'm not blaming that, but we do know that recruiting numbers are directly linked to contact time. And because kids haven't been in high schools and we haven't had the recruiters in the high schools, contact time is very, very low. So consequently, you have much lower recruiting numbers. That's one key factor. Another key factor is just the familiarity with the American citizenry with their military. Now, we're at an all-time high, 50-year high of re-enlistment, which is incredible, actually. That indicates that the people in the military are satisfied with what they're doing every day. So that's an all-time 50-year high. But 80%, about 70 to 80% in that range, depending on the service, of our folks in uniform are in uniform who have a family member in uniform, either a father, mother, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, grandfather, grandmother, something along those lines. So it's familiarity with the military that makes the difference, I think, in terms of recruiting. And that's where we got to get out. We have to get out more into the society. We got to make sure we increase our contact time significantly. And on the politicization piece, look, I have tried from day one to make sure that we have an apolitical, nonpartisan U.S. military. If we have anything other than that, that is a danger to the republic. We must remain a nonpartisan, apolitical military. That's fundamental to this country. That's what I'm committed to. That's what all the generals are committed to, and that's what you have right now, and that's what we want to continue to keep.
Joe Milley, I liked your answer to Senator Sullivan on you being able to compete against China. Do you actually believe that all the countries you named will show up if China invades Taiwan?
I think in different ways, yes. Perhaps not all with combat forces and that sort of thing. I think allies operate differently. Every country operates in its own strategic interest at the moment in time. But I do know that we have an incredible network of allies and friends around the world. And in the Pacific, we have a series of bilateral defense treaties that are ratified by the Senate. And those are ironclad, you know, with the Republic of Korea, Japan, Philippines, Thailand, Australia. These are treaties that, you know, we are committed to fight on their behalf, sort of thing. So I think we have a network of allies and partners that gives us a strategic advantage over China or Russia, for that matter. If you look at who China's friends are, it's not very many. They're operating in a purely transactional way around the world. They're trying to garner as many natural resources as they can from around the world. But there's not a lot of people who are, quote-unquote, friends with China. There are many, many countries that are very tight, very close with the United States, and that's a great strength of ours, and I do think they would be there in time of need.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Thank you very much. Senator Rosen, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate holding this hearing. I want to thank each of the witnesses today for testifying for your service to the country. And General Milley, I know this is going to be your last time before the committee, and I want to thank you for your decades of distinguished service, leading the brave men and women of our armed forces, and really navigating so many challenges worldwide. We all appreciate your service. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about combating Iranian aggression, because attacks on the U.S. installations and service members by Iran's terrorist proxies are increasing, particularly by rocket and drone attack. The Pentagon estimates that hundreds of American troops have been killed by Iranian-backed militias, including, as we've discussed already today, a deadly attack last week on a U.S. base in Syria. There are families across the country. They're without their loved ones as a direct result of Iranian aggression. I can't repeat that enough, a direct result of Iranian aggression. Yet Iran's regime has never been held accountable for orchestrating attacks against Americans. So, Secretary Austin, I appreciate that in this latest instance last week, the U.S. responded with airstrikes against individuals connected with the IRGC, but just as you told my colleagues, Senator Cott and Senator Budd, we know there have been about 83 such attacks by Iranian proxies on U.S. forces in Syria in the past 2 years alone. We've only retaliated 4 times. And so why has the United States responded so infrequently, particularly when these militias are the most pervasive threat to U.S. and coalition forces in the region?
Well, first of all, as was stated earlier, our troops have the ability to certainly protect themselves, and there have been responses, local responses to certain types of activity, and our troops always have the ability to do that. In terms of major responses, strikes, you're right, there's only been 4 of those. At the 3 tours I spent in Iraq, I can tell you that me and my troops received a lot of attacks from Iranians. But when we respond, we want to make sure that Iranian-backed militias, we want to make sure that we are going after the element that's responsible for whatever that activity is. So it takes a little time to develop, attribution, and then we want to make sure that we are holding the right element accountable, and we're doing everything that we can to protect our troops. So all of those things go into, our consideration when we plan a response option.
Well, I have 2 questions, one for you, General Milley, another one for you, Secretary Austin. So the first one's for General Milley to follow up. What can we do proactively to counter these militias before they injure and kill American service members? And then, Secretary Austin, can you tell us, do our commanders, who I know want to do more, have the necessary authorities to target Iran's proxies other than the ability for self-defense? So, General Milley, we'll start with you.
In terms of proactive measures, what we're looking at is force protection and all of the various camps and outposts in the Central Command area of operations, specifically in Iraq and Syria, where these attacks occur. They have, we think, adequate force protection in terms of counter-rocket and missile defenses. They are able to, in fact, 4 responses is probably an understatement, because we end up shooting down a lot of these incoming UAVs, for example. If a rocket or a 107 rocket or something like that is going to miss the compound by 2, 3, 4, 5 kilometers, that's a significant amount. So really what we owe you are some better numbers, actually, on attacks that I would categorize as actual attacks on the compound. And missing a compound by 2 or 3 kilometers, that may or may not. We don't know what that was necessarily. So we owe you some better numbers. But to get to your point about proactively, we have to work closely with the Iraqi government for those Shia militia groups that are inside Iraq. And we have to continue to work with our partners in the region for the attacks that are occurring in Syria. So working with our indigenous allies and partners is key. And then also putting these groups on notice. The various Shia militia groups, we know who they are. letting them know that we will respond affirmatively and forcefully if they attack our troops. We've done that. There are some of these groups that are much more aggressive than others, and we have actually in the past done some things to those groups that are not necessarily on the front page of the paper. So there are activities that are occurring that do act as a proactive measure. And the last thing I would say with respect to Iran, messaging Iran is critically important. The Iranian government is a complex, large organization, and the supreme leader may or may not be making every single decision. We do know that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Force, and specifically their Quds Force, which is designated a terrorist organization, that group there is what we need to be targeting, and targeting them very hardly or harshly over time, and that's exactly what we plan on doing.
Thank you. I know my time is up, but can Secretary Austin just ask if we have the necessary authorities? Quickly, then I'm done.
I think we do, Senator, and this is something that we need to continue to review as we go forward. We certainly have the right to self-defense. We have authorities under the 2001 AUMF, and that enables us to do what we need to do in our counter-ISIS efforts. But again, as we go forward, it's always good to look at the authorities and make sure that we evolve them if that's required. And so you have my commitment to work with leadership and with you to continue to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. The committee will stand in recess until 12:55 hours and will reconvene in closed session in SVC 217. Thank you, gentlemen.